Hello, hello.
Hello.
Hey, how's it going, everybody?
Hello.
Hey, can you hear me?
Hello, Wadika. I can hear you.
Yeah. So, all right. So, welcome to second EP on off-road colony design with MANRVA. Today we have two special guests, which is Daniel and Wiwat. So, would you like to introduce yourself a little bit to the audience?
Okay. My name is Daniel. I studied international relations in Bangkok, Thailand, and political science before that. And I've always been interested in space and the future for, I guess, humanity and also people, different cultures, things like that. So, yeah, thanks for having me on.
Yay. What about you, Wiwat?
Hi, I'm Wiwat. Well, actually, I'm a freelance translator, writer, and right now, well, for the last 4 years, I've been doing a Facebook page called Dark Sky Thailand. The main objective is actually to raise awareness about light pollution and to conserve dark areas, dark skies in Thailand. But since there's so little content to maintain, the momentum of the page, I put in a bit of my personal interest in space. I'm not that much of an enthusiast, but yeah, but kind of find my niche into putting content on the page so they gain more traction and audience. And then I found myself that, oh, I have a place in Thailand, in the Thai language, where space is still, not so popular, and also not from a nerd, space nerd perspective, but from an ex-journalist perspective. So I thought, try to find the latest developments about space around. Yeah.
So yeah, I think today we gonna be talking about space agency and then and their plans on going to Mars. Yeah, because I think last week we have an activities. So now we're on a journey of building, can I say, colony on off-road planet. And before we jump into what we're gonna talk or our chit chat, I wanted to update to everyone that it seems like we're going to Mars. So anybody here is a Mars fans? Daniel seems like it.
I voted for Mars. Yes.
Yay! What about you, PB? What?
I'm okay. I'm kind of a neutral that way, as you've
Yeah.
seen in my previous comments.
Do you think the option is too limited? Because we only have Mars, right? And I think on our last sessions, Pee Watt was talking about, we want to go to Ceres, And I feel like your suggestions is quite out there, right? So people are more familiar with going to the moon and then Mars, right? So what do you feel about it? You feel like, we should have more options or whatnot?
I think it's always good to have options. But if we're looking at realistic stuff, if we can design this sort of colony on Mars and a Luna base, and it's okay, we can do this, then it's okay, it makes more sense, or it's possible that we can spread beyond that. It's just the moon and Mars are very accessible, it's the closest, I guess, celestial locations that we can get to, the most feasible, and yeah, so for now it's a good option.
Yeah, and the Moon and Mars are the ones that we know the most about, especially the Moon. But then we can already see that the Moon will be very crowded because, just about every a few dozen countries are going to the Moon and use the Moon as the base to test science and how we can to Mars or colonize Mars. So yeah, I mean, I'm not rooting for Mars as such, as the somewhere else more suitable than Mars. But
Mhm.
on the practicality side, yes, I totally agree that
Yeah.
Mars is next.
I mean, the idea is definitely going to be out there, like for going to Sirius. But yeah, like,
Mm.
Daniel said that, according to like technologies or what we have now, it's still like, yet to come. So talking about going off planet, right? One thing that came with it is like space agency. Right. So do you guys have any, favorable space agency? I mean,
Well, me being the only American here, of course I like NASA. But no, I see a lot of I especially nowadays. I don't think it's as exclusive as it once was.
mhm.
Especially since NASA is branching out. Even NASA has gone to Russia in order to send astronauts up, since our space program has sort of been on pause. So yes, as an agency, I kind of see NASA at the forefront, but I don't see it as prohibiting other countries from getting involved.
Mm. I think we have like a lot of collaborations projects going on as well with like, what's ExoMars. I think that was like a collaboration between like ESA and Roscosmos, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a bunch of people trying to get into space. I think NASA might so far be the only one who talk about sending human there.
Mm.
Like actually, have like a project or plan to send a human there. So I think with ESA and Roscosmos, I think they're more like rover and sort of thing like satellites or what's in the orbits oriented. I could be wrong, so feel free to check me if I'm wrong.
We're talking about Mars or the Moon?
Mars.
Mars.
Yeah.
Well, actually, the for NASA and it's only like in that kind of like a visionary vision phase, so to speak, because nothing concrete is yet to be made on the moon for now until the
Mhm.
Artemis program settles in the next few years. But actually, if you've been following, China is the first country to announce that they will send humans to Mars.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
they have a concrete plan laid out for the next 15 years. So they've recently just sent out a probe to Mars on their first try and succeeded. They put a rover there, so it's
Mhm.
exploring right now. But then, just soon after that, they announced that they would send a sample return mission by the end of this decade.
Mm.
And even though they haven't got the technology, well, they haven't got like even a mock-up of whatever that robot would look like, but they have already succeeded in getting sample return from the moon. The
Mhm.
latest, the Changtrakul 5, which was completed late last year. So they've already demonstrated they have the capability of a, a an out of world surface sampling mission. They
Mm.
demonstrate they can do that um, just as good as Japan has doing getting sampling from the asteroid review and also with NASA getting sample return from the Bennu asteroid. So yeah, these three agencies, JAXA of Japan, NASA of the United States, and CNSA or the China Manned Space Agency, whatever. So basically being called China, right? Collectively, right? It's several agencies working together. So
Mhm.
yeah, they say that by 2035 they will, sorry, by 2030, that's the next decade, they will have men on Mars.
Hmm.
So they're the first country to say that. But if you look back a few years earlier, back in I think 2017, the UAE announced that they will be, well, at least they will, let's say they will be the first, but they will be colonizing Mars. They will have human settlements with their own people within a century from 2017. So that's within 2117. And they've demonstrated their capabilities by sending across successfully. Um, at the same time as the United States started earlier this year. So we have now have a probe going around orbiting Mars. So yeah, they have an ambitious program. They have a vision. So
Wow, so they beat NASA by having more solid plan.
it's not beating.
I'm just teasing.
Yeah. No, I mean because
It's time for you to defend Daniel.
UAE all country, right? So may I touch on the UAE and the space agency with the
Yeah.
Mars mission, right?
Yeah.
Because the UAE has always been, well, not always, since the 60s, since Western countries, Western oil companies have discovered a lot of oil reserves under the ground basically in the Arabian Peninsula. All those guys are rich because of exporting oil. But previously, they had no natural resources to speak of. UAE, Dubai, and Abu Dhabi, the Emirates there, have been like exporting only pearls. And after World War II, there's been global recession. So they can't really make any money out of silicon because no one buys it. So, but then they got oil, and then okay, they got rich out of oil. So they use the resources to send out their children, their people, to go and get the best education abroad to the United States, to go to the UK, and after 2 generations they realized their oil will run out. And then what would they do? How would they sustain their way of life uh, in their homeland? So they look at the models of all these current developed nations like the United States or the UK or Germany and Japan, that to be a leader, to be basically to be rich and sustainable, you have to have technology. You have to make technology in order to make things that people want globally would buy. Like for example, like I can't work with like with the phone. Everybody, most people on earth now, all three of us need a phone, and I'm hooked on the phone for communication, for work, for socializing, for just about everything. I didn't even have haven't had a TV since 2014, but this is what I'm hooked on, right? It's like the UAE can make, like something that you need to depend on, like this phone, right? Then they can sustain the economy, and that's what this current generation of Emiratis are willing to go with. And they've been planning this. We've been trying to do this over a decade. The UAE has been trying to get all the Arab nations to get form a space agency collectively, like European Space Agency, because each single nation has few people, and less than that is that all the brains that can do space technology within satellite or rockets, right?
Yeah.
Or
Like
even,
now that we're talking about like UAE, like
Yeah.
anybody like get a chance to check out their conceptual artwork on City on Mars.
sorry?
So like anybody heard of they just launched his sort of like concept art for how the Mars city gonna be. Anybody familiar with that?
I believe I've seen their like like concept art, like a render. It looks very much like their airport. you know, very clean, very big, and very open.
Yeah.
So I think in that sort of way you can kind of see how important culture is also when it comes to different countries and stuff.
Yeah.
Because there, and if you take a look at the art, it looks like a floor plan for an airport. Honestly, in my opinion. So I don't see the they're not really explaining like, okay, this is to capture radiation, or this is to block the sunlight, or this is, no, it's more aesthetic. It's like, okay,
Yes.
I can see myself walking down there, and you know, at this point, that's what I understood it to be.
I mean, I think this sort of like briefly explaining it a little bit with like, so how it's like really, just like dome and with like a really clear, sort of like grass as well, right? Glass? Yeah, glass. So I think the way they wanted to like protect themselves from like radiations and things like that, it's like, using water to kind of like help blocking that thing as well. But then I also, have a friend who like just screaming like radiation by looking from the visual. Oh, we got some questions over here, but I think it's related to politics. So here. It's, ooh.
Well, Daniel, you're an international relations specialist. You go first.
This question is dedicated to you.
Yes. Well, I think it goes back sort of to the space race, and how that played a very big, important role here on Earth. But I also see the future sort of change because of things like the International Space Station, where we're sort of put in a situation that you work together. And when you're on a different planet, it's my hope, at least, that politics will stay on Earth, and we will sort of use Mars as, I don't know, space station 2.0, where we're trying to like work together for science and for humanity in general. I think how could the diplomatic relations change? And well, I just voiced my opinion, I guess, or my hope that it wouldn't really matter who colonized first, as long as the goal sort of remains the same, that it's for humanity and it's for science and it's for the future. That's what I have.
Okay.
You got any input from you, Wiwat? What do you think?
Well, actually, China, United States, and about 60 other different countries, including Thailand and Russia, for that matter, have signed the Outer Space Treaty. So basically, that was formed like 10 years after Yuri Gagarin went into space, and then people realized that, wait, if everybody's going to be colonizing outer space and using it for their own benefits, and then that was work. So basically, the law that all these different countries have signed on to is that doesn't work in space. Basically, the origin country, territory, say you put a spacecraft or humans into wherever outside of Earth, the responsibility, the accountability still remains of those states, right? So China cannot go to Mars, or any country go to Mars and then plant the flag and say this whole planet is mine, because the law still applies back on Earth, right? You can plant the flag, it's only symbolic, okay, for practicality, you know, you set up a perimeter, basically, okay, this is my space and I'm going to be working things on. So yeah, you know, that's out of courtesy. Other countries will go near you, right? But like, I think the vice administrator, the deputy administrator of NASA said recently, just before she was appointed, the deputy administrator of NASA, she said that the US still has to work with China out in space because out there you have to work with the people with the resources that you have because you can't work because once you're out there, right? You have your astronauts out in space on the Moon or Mars, wherever, and it's those people who can help one another in terms of crisis. You look at the movie Gravity, right? You have the space station crash incident, right? And then you have to evacuate from space and back onto Earth. And where did Sandra Bullock go? She went into the Chinese space station, right? And hitchhiked one of the capsules back to Earth. You know, that just demonstrated that out in space, whoever is out there, need to work together. You know, even though you have the U.S. sanctions on technologies with China, but in space, um, like European countries, they still work with China. Other countries still work with China. So United States still work with Russia. Russia works with China. So arbitrarily, there's still cooperation among the scientific communities at least, if not the diplomatic. Right. So, like NASA opens up to all your moon samples, all scientists to see and sample and research on. China that's the same because no country have enough brain and resources to get the benefit out of the all this so precious so few samples of off-world samples from we only got like less than 2 kilograms of dirt from the moon, and only like about 100 grams from Ryukyu asteroid, and that's to share with the whole Earth, right? So, and you have like a dozen people that you can do the research on. That's not enough, right? You need hundreds of people to do research so that you can capitalize on what you have. So the scientific community, they don't care about what nationality, what country. They just care about career and so on. And so on.
Mhm. We also have another comment saying that I agree that we should stick politics to Earth and visual science. Visual science, yeah. All right, now that we're talking about, we touched base a little bit on the diplomatics aspect of it, and then now we talk a lot more about space agency. Like, how important do you think space agency is? For example, like, for you and I, Wiwat, Thailand doesn't really have one. We sort of have an equivalent, sort of, right? But not an actual like space agency.
Well, Thailand has GISA, which only operates on the Earth observation satellite, but it has basically it has no legal power to regulate anything. It just operates. It's like AIS and DTAC and Stream Move that operate, you know, the mobile phones in Thailand, right? But they don't regulate. They're not the one who's setting up the policy to regulate the frequency. So because since Thailand doesn't have a space program, we don't really need a space agency. And when someone comes up, the private sector or like the King Mongkut University of Technology, Commercial, the other one, build their own first satellite, all satellite. They still need permission from it from an agency, and just was like a proxy. Like they will file the application to the UN and to the international agencies to say that, okay, Thailand will launch this payload and what the mission is, it will do what orbit it will be, and that's just all the formality. But if we were to like be sending um, humans to wherever the moon or Mars, there
Mhm.
is some kind of a governing body to regulate that. I think Thailand is working on that because we plan to put our first probe to the moon in 2000 and 2027 or 2028,
Mhm.
SC1. Um, so someone will need to regulate that. But
Yeah.
the project was born out of all of these different state enterprises, right? The Synchrotron Institute of Thailand, the National Astronomical Research Institute of Thailand, and also with GISTA. So these three state enterprises, join
Mhm.
hands. But they can still do it without an agency.
Yeah.
Uh, they can still do it because in practice, GISTA has been well, not applying for all these satellites to go into space on behalf of Thailand for the last 20 years or so. But how do we regulate it? New
Mhm.
Space is a Thai private sector company.
Maybe we could learn from the American.
Yes, or UAE. I think the United States is different because it's a big power, and you have because like NASA was born out of you have already have the military capabilities of launching rockets and bombs, right? And NASA is a civilian, so you branch out to form a civilian agency. Whereas Thailand, we don't have the military capabilities of sending, missiles
Mhm.
anywhere, just to defend our borders and things like that. But we don't have that capability.
Yeah.
So we don't need an agency that builds rockets. We can
Mm.
have an agency just to regulate when we have so many companies applying for, all over the satellite to do this and do that. And
Yeah. So
then,
I mean, what's the Daniel have opinions on this? Like, because NASA has been here forever, and
correct.
you know,
Uh,
how was it do you think it's important? Is space
okay,
agencies?
I lost the.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh no! He went out the airlock.
no, just to stow the flag, disrupting communication.
Yeah.
Isn't
I think he's back now. Welcome back.
Hello, sorry, something happened.
No worries.
Okay. No, one interesting thing that I was thinking about whether a country has a space agency or not, tying it back to our earlier point, especially with the UAE, you're talking about money. And it's very hard, it's a new realm that takes a lot of money to get into. So a lot of developing countries that don't have this money are sort of limited. But in that same token, you don't necessarily have to, like you were mentioning, you don't need rockets, or you don't need the ability to launch rockets, because a lot of these countries have the infrastructure to create technology that is so vital to other countries for a multitude of reasons, but especially for space. So I can see the balance between having a space agency and not having a space agency. If especially if you're a developing country, it doesn't mean that you can't be involved in the space journey, odyssey, whatever you want to call it. If you are fairly decent at a certain textile or manufacturing or something along those means, you can actually support the other agencies in getting to space.
Mm-hmm. I think for Thailand, we work a lot with JAXA as well, right? Like with multiple like projects and whatnot. I'm not entirely in depth about it. Hugh, what do you happen to know anything more onto this?
We have been working with actually, from my personal perspective, well, actually, we've been working with JAXA for like a decade, but it's more of an outreach relationship with JAXA, meaning that Japan has been inviting our youth, our children, our students to, it's kind of a education diplomacy to establish Japan as like the leading educational destination. So that's what like people like non-IC, Canadian IC studies. So she's been applying like all these simple experiments that astronauts can do. So that's an outreach program. Real scientific program would have to mean like a kind of like a technology transfer, meaning that if we can have students that study about how to make satellites and things like that, yes, we can. Dr. Barrett and sorry, I can't remember his name, the doctor who's leading the aeronautics program in in that university that built science first satellite called the NACSAT. They both studied about building satellites in Japan.
Mm-hmm.
On a personal kind of level, to pursue their own goal. But on the more governmental level, we have we have a working relationship with China. Actually, the next satellite that's being driven by the Thai Space Consortium, PSCP, P stands for like I think prototype. That that will rely on the technological transfer from China with the Chinese agency and their institute there as well.
Mm-hmm.
And the head of the engineer building the PSCP, he's a Chinese graduate. I mean, he went to study about building satellites
Mm-hmm.
in China. Yeah.
So thank you, Hugh. What Daniel, like, do you ever heard of like GSTEP before?
Not really. No. It's you know, here in America, we're sort of inundated with the big agencies. So of course you have NASA, you have JAXA and ESA, and our semi-rival of Roscosmos. But yeah, same thing. Like I was saying, the developing countries don't at least get the same media attention, I would say, over here. So yeah, you know, it's always good to learn about the cooperations like we were talking about.
I mean, yeah, I think it's more of a infographic, right? Like it's all about like satellite and stuff. So it's not entirely. So it's not like, you know, out there. But yeah. So seems like we have to out games Wiwat. And then also earlier you mentioned about like you know to have like a space agency, it's a lot of money talk as well, right? Like personally, do you think like if Thailand ever to have our own space agency, like what do we need to do, or how should we approach it from your own perspective?
Me?
Yeah.
Well, I would almost look at it sort of like ESA more than anything, because if you look at Europe and the European Union, they're made up of smaller states, countries, and there's just because of things like GDP, actual size, you're competing with a lot of different factors. So would I see Thailand have its own space agency? I'm not sure, but maybe like if you talk about ASEAN, like the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, something like that, forming together into a space program, that seems possible, and that seems more logical than any one of those countries having their own programs.
Yeah. What about you, Wiwat?
Well, I agree with Daniel on that, on taking ESA as a role model. Even though actually reflecting back on the UAE Space Agency, they actually wanted to have an Arab Space Agency collectively like ESA, but then it's like, all those countries couldn't agree on a mutual kind of vision. So they said about doing their own thing, right? Uh, in the ASEAN, the 10 countries here, we have such a wide disparity in terms of resources. I mean, Singapore is the richest, but has no resources of its own. They are the bankers, investors, right? Whereas in Thailand, Indonesia, we have lots of natural resources and labor to work with, but we are not as developed in terms of academically and the infrastructure as Singapore. But Singapore can't survive on their own. But let's look forward into space industry, space economy. Space economy industry, even in Europe and United States, benefit from their own existing industry, car industry, tech industry. Because you need to carry upon all those brains and all those infrastructures, all the supply chains that are already in place to be able to level up to the space technology industry. Thailand biggest has the biggest automobile industry in ASEAN. All the Japanese, European, American companies have invested in building this infrastructure embedded in our economy for the last 50 years. And I think it's actually easier for Thailand to build upon that infrastructure of the existing electronics and automobile industry in Thailand, because many of the components and all the know-how to make satellites or even rockets come from those industries. We have electronics industry, we have car industry, and you just need to level it up a little bit. Then you can have space in Thailand. That's what some of the players in the Thai space industry realize. But the challenge right now is to convince the government that we have the way forward. You would just buy into our ideas.
It might be
Yeah,
taking a while. Sorry, Daniel, you got something?
no, I was going to say that that's a very good point. Not to get into politics, but sort of tied to politics. So, especially because of funding, and if you look at, especially if you're a developing country, all the different issues that you could have or you do have, and you only have so much money, and let's say you're the government, you have to choose where that money goes. So in space, you talk about the moon or Mars, and it's like, okay, it's a red piece of rock, and nothing has lived there for the last 5 billion years. What are we going to do with it? You know, so it's a very sort of a gamble, especially if you are developing. You know, UAE, very small, it has all this access to money, so it can sort of, it has a little more wiggle room. But when you have a lot of different issues and not limited resources, but limited financial resources, you almost have your hands tied with what you can actually do. I'd almost say for that reason, a country would maybe not come to the forefront in the space age. You know, like let's say NASA or JAXA or something like that. But it would, that's why it's so important, I think, for a supportive role for these developing countries to realize that yes, you can't launch rockets every day, you can't do all these things, but you can definitely have a hand in, like we just saw the new solar panels on the space station. There's a wide array of things that are available that you can contribute without so much sacrifice, which I know is very important for developing countries.
Really well said. So yeah, now that we're talking about like, was it the public sector? Like, what about like private? You know, because now everybody's like in the game, like whether you're public or private, not like, you know, SpaceX for examples. What do you think about, you know, this phenomenon of like having so like multiple company trying to go to like space?
Well, personally, I think it's a good thing. It's very good because it sort of it breaks like a invisible chain that different countries would have. If you look at the space program with NASA, you know, we spent something like 20 years designing this last rocket, and it's $20+ billion. And it goes up once and it's destroyed. With a private company like SpaceX with reusable rockets, you can see how space could be a lot more affordable, a lot more accessible, and you, maybe not right now, but maybe in the future I could see a lot less like Overwatch government. We still have to abide by like FAA, you know, different flight organizations, but not so much. Private companies won't be as tied to politics and governmental decisions as we develop more and more. That's at least what I see in the future.
What about you, Wiwat? Any comments?
Yeah, I think, yeah, I agree with Daniel. The private sector will be the key players in the space industry, space sector, because they have the incentive to make money, basically, right? The bottom line is to make their shareholders happy with making money. So whatever they do, and they have that efficiency and mindset of the private sector, you know, like SpaceX has done. And looking closer into Thailand, you can see that the mobile operators in Thailand, there is one government operator, and it's currently the smallest one because the efficiency is nothing compared with the private sector like AAS, VTech, and True, right? So whatever Thai space agency will be like they will need to realize that, and they already know this, that they cannot be like in such a badass regulator that whole development back. They need to be broad enough, and incentivize private sector in into doing whatever they want to do to contribute to the economy. I mean, instead of the old ways of doing things, the economy in Thailand is that, oh, Germany, USA, UK, please put further investment into Thailand, into building whatever factories here in Thailand. It's not like that anymore. It's,
Mhm.
we can't offer cheap labor to make products. Space is expensive. You can't say that we have the cheapest labor in ASEAN and that's how we can make your satellite profitable. No, you need the best brains in the world to make satellites. And we
Mhm.
currently have a shortage of that.
Yeah.
In the vocational education level, we have a lack of qualified technicians to make cars. We have like 200,000 um, people shortage every year. You
You
know,
think it's more of a like qualifications, or that Thailand itself doesn't able to nurture those people as well, so they might not entirely stay here and then pursue or help sort of like build these visions of like high space or
and how to keep the brain drain from happening. You have like the best brain, and say, okay, say you have a dozen Thai people who went to study about satellite building, and then they come back to Thailand, and there's no job for them, right? So you need to create jobs for them. You need to create a vision of what
Mhm.
Thailand will be like in say in 40 years time, in 50 years time, in relation to the global space economy. I read
Mhm.
somewhere that by 2050, space industry will be the world's largest by value.
Mhm.
That's supplying everything, even the fuel industry, because by that time, in 40 years' time, no one will be pumping fuel, petrol, gasoline, and diesel into their vehicles anymore, because all of the cars in the future, in only 10, 20 years' time, will be electric cars, will be electric cars. And the industry that is on the up with the space industry. You might not see it in Thailand today because we're not using industry.
I
But
have one question in particular just for you. Personally, do you feel like would as for like space industry or business, do you think Thailand would triumph by like private company to go into space, or the governmental one more? Like which one do you think? Like is it would be like, sorry, let me compose the questions again. Like to get into like space race or whatsoever, do you think, could you like imagine seeing like a Thai private company entering this race instead of waiting on the government to build this environment, right?
it's an egg and chicken thing. You cannot have the private sector doing any real business for sure if the
Mm-hmm.
government doesn't really allow it,
Mm-hmm.
right? And to get the government to allow it, you need to be able to convince them.
Yeah.
And to be able to convince the government, you need to convince the people. So like recently, like the end of last year, when the Thai Minister of Higher Education and Science, he announced in a press conference, totally unrelated to space, that Thailand is sending satellites into space and to the moon.
Mm-hmm.
And that drew a lot of criticism because we were not, basically, we were not informed, the public. I mean, we're in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic crisis and with the economic recession in place. And then
Mm-hmm.
suddenly someone says that, are we going to moon? And it's like, the public doesn't have that, it's not doesn't have that sympathy. It's not crazy on that idea because we have a bigger issue to deal with. So to get the support from the public, that is the biggest challenge that Thailand has
Mm.
right now. It doesn't um, it doesn't cost that much. The current Thai space consortium is only using 3 billion baht, which is only 100 US million dollars.
Mm-hmm.
The satellite, one that goes to the moon. But the ordinary most Thai people still see that as a waste of money because
Yeah.
the government or all the other different players still cannot communicate what are we gaining from going
Yeah.
with that money.
Yeah.
Because for some say that is so little money, but for
Yeah.
most people say that's too much money.
Yeah. So what about you, Daniel? Because like, I mean, of course, like NASA has been established like, way longer, and they have a really wonderful way of communicating that to, the people as well. But I think for like when it first started, it do struggle as well, like trying to communicate how important it is to get it to space and investing in
Well,
space technology and stuff.
Yeah, I think even now, we have people questioning, like, why are we doing all this when we have problems here at home, whether it's in our country or in the ocean, in the rainforest, health issues. Like, why are we spending all this money on a program that has no foreseeable benefit, where we have all these issues that are being researched and they're begging for all this funding. But I think if the communication is there, and like you said, if you have public support, I think it's shooting. It's like the utmost level of research and science, or any part of the STEM programs, is space, and very few people realize the benefits that we get from studying space and working in space. Yeah, but correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe contact lenses were sort of developed with help on the space station, the new material. So it's all these different things that we could benefit from. But like you were saying, it's very hard to, you look at SpaceX and you see this nice shiny rocket, and yeah, it looks cool, but then someone says, okay, that's whatever, $10 million. It's like, well, that's a lot of money. Is it worth it to send 2 or 3 people up there for 6 months and then back? So hopefully, I think the communication around the world improves. I think we do have a new generation of kids who are getting interested in science and in space. So I think that's going to change, because you also have to look at it from the other perspective. Like, if you're the government, do you have a receptive audience? If I'm very much into space and you're telling me space things, I'm like, okay, cool, let's go for it. But if, let's say, I'm a farmer and you're like, okay, you just spent $10 billion on this program where I'm having trouble with my fields. So I see the promise in the new generation, I think, where, and I could be wrong, but I think it's sort of turning into like science is cool again. So if Yeah, communication is very big. So I think if governments and these large companies can reach out to customers and their people, it would be a lot easier for them to actually take hold.
Mm.
Can I just add another perspective about the different kind of space agencies, which might work for Thailand? As we both kind of agree that if the government doesn't have the public support, then we won't be able to go anywhere. There's a new space agency, Luxembourg, a small country in Europe. They only established it 2 3 years ago, but they're not using any real government funding. Luxembourg is a country known for their bankers and investors. They don't have natural resources.
Mm-hmm.
And the way they're doing spacing into the space industry, they need to establish a space agency that allows private investors. Luxembourg is one of the biggest investors in the world for mining. And they realize that there's a lot of resources out there in space, like asteroids and things like that. And of course, like planets like Mars and the Moon. But they will do it in their own way, in that they just make the model, the regulation work so that they invite other companies and then match investors to go and do research on different projects in how to mine space. So Luxembourg is the first country in the world that says, I will mine space, and that will be my next goal to sustain my economy.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm done with investing in the whole world. I've done everything. Space is the next frontier. So they're doing very minimal amount of government taxpayer money, right? But inviting all these different private sectors in. I think Thailand should do that. Just have a framework that fits in with the international treaty, laws, whatever that regulate about space. But let the private sector do their own thing. And if those private companies will find a way to make money, but you just have to have a kind of a framework that allows them to operate. Safely that when they invest in work, operate in Thailand, they will be able to make money in the long term.
Mm-hmm.
And you only need to convince a handful of private investors. It's easier than trying to convince 70 million Thai people that they're going to space. So the challenge is a lot different. You want to convince 100 people. It's much easier than 70 million people.
Mm-hmm. It's such a interesting conversation we've been having today. It's actually turned out quite, more serious than I, anticipated. But it's great. It's great. It's amazing.
Well,
so,
yeah.
Sorry.
No, I mean, from what I can tell, we're talking a lot about cooperations and different countries, and to get off the serious note, because we've been on that, and like I was just thinking, if we do develop Mars, you have so many aspects, especially involving the people,
Mm-hmm.
that could help draw people into the agency, and it's sort of a cycle that would sort of break you away from government. If you can have a race around Olympus Mons on Mars, it's like, okay, the Mons Prix, who's going to win? Something like that. So it's all about us going together, and it's for science. It's not for politics. It's we all have a part in this.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what's exciting.
Yeah, definitely. So before we call it off, anybody have any honorable mentions or any topic they like to talk a little bit more? Or is everybody skip?
Well, I think for Thailand, because there's a lack of public support, I think it's up to people like us who are space enthusiasts to try to reach out to the public and try to not to educate, but at least to get an understanding of why we think space will be good for us. You know, so long as that we don't use too much of the tax money.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I feel like, definitely you don't need to be like a space enthusiast or like people within science field to get into space, just like us people talking about it, and maybe if you're really, really fascinated by it, you can take it from there, right? But, that's why, this whole live session is happening. It's just friends talking about space and nothing more. We can, make mistakes and then, correct each other and just have fun. All right, everybody, thank you for joining me today. It's been wonderful. And hopefully, we could, catch up again and talk on different topics. All right. Have a nice day, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye for now.
Have a good weekend.
You too.
Thank you.